Silent Spring, Chapter 14, One in Every Four, by Lauren Kennedy, Haley Wabacher, Eddie Hynett, and myself, Sammy Wee. Our question for this chapter was, what impact will chemicals used to control nature have on the load of carcinogens in the environment and, as a result, how will this affect organisms? Our claim for this chapter is, in Chapter 14, Rachel Carson cautions that by using chemicals, we are increasing the amount of carcinogens in the environment and therefore harming our overall health, as 1 in every 4 humans will develop cancer.
In 1775, Sir Percival Pott became the first to note that external environmental agents produce malignant changes and growths. Pott discovered that chimney sweepers commonly develop scrotal cancer, which he thought to be related to the amount of soot their bodies took in. Although he did not have definitive proof, Pott's discovery represented the first step towards discovering the connection between chemicals and cancer. More than 100 years later, there were very minimal improvements on Pott's work. Eventually, around 1875, there was a similar connection between industrial workers and skin cancer. This reinforced Pott's idea because as more chemicals were put into the environment, people started to show more signs of malignant growth. Around 1900, sources of industrial carcinogens were discovered, but nothing was done to stop them. Instead, many more would be created throughout the 20th century. In 1942, the use of DDT began in the military. Just 3 years later, in 1945, it was expanded to be used for civilians. These events showed no concern for the possible damage done to humans because it ignored the previous connections to chemicals and cancer. Then, in 1950, the use of a wide variety of pesticides began. This, combined with chemicals from the various industries and militaries, led to the large increase in cancer rates, which were reported in 1959. While malignant growth rates were only 4% around 1900, they jumped to 15% in 1958. By looking at the increase in rates of chemical usage alongside the increase in cancer rates, it becomes clear that as more chemicals are introduced, more cancers are formed. While cancer in children was a rarity in the 1930s, it became very common by the time Carson published her book. Carson warned against the use of chemicals for their serious health risks, but it is clear that we have not listened. Today, cancer is very common for people of all ages. Instead of preventing cancer growth altogether, we aim to cure it after it already forms. Carson sets up the first part of her argument by outlining the history of the introduction of chemicals into the environment. Then she finishes it off by describing the history of cancer and citing cancer statistics. Bringing both of these timelines together highlights the trend between them. Overall, Carson is able to strengthen her claim that increasing the amount of chemicals in our environment is dangerous because it leads to the development of cancer.
To open this chapter, Carson explains that cancer has always been around since the beginning of life. Some elements, like UV rays from the sun, created hazards for life which made them adjust or perish. Radiation can come from the sun, certain rocks, or arsenic washed out from the environment. All these carcinogens are still found in nature, but life has been able to overcome and fight the hazards. Then, man-made carcinogens were created and introduced into the environment. These unnatural chemicals entered the environment and made people sick, one of these being soot. Chimney workers exposed to it became sick. The reason natural carcinogens weren't an extreme threat to life is because life adapts to its environment through the natural process of time. Because the man-made chemicals were introduced into the environment carelessly and abruptly, life was given no time to adjust and lessen their harm. While natural cancerous materials can still cause cancer, the man-made carcinogens are a greater threat to the environment and mankind, as we don't have the adequate defenses. Also, the man-made chemicals increase the amount of total carcinogens and therefore harm overall health.
Warburg's theory. Many chemicals commonly used as pesticides, such as chlorinated hydrocarbons and phenols, are known to cause uncoupling of ATP and to destroy enzymes that are necessary for the oxidative cycle. Both of these effects destroy cellular respiration and cause the cell to revert to fermentation. This supports the claim that we are increasing the amount of carcinogens in our environment and thus increasing our risk of developing cancer because Warburg believes that chemical carcinogens disrupt the process of cellular respiration. Once cellular respiration is destroyed, the cells are deprived of oxygen and have no way of producing ATP. Without this, the cell cannot produce energy. The damaged cells begin to rely on fermentation, and eventually this method is able to produce as much energy as cellular respiration. Carson states that when this is achieved, cancer cells have been created from normal body cells. As stated earlier, many popular pesticides that we put into our environment are capable of damaging cells and putting them on the track to reliance on fermentation and eventually cancer. Mutation theory. Benzene hexachloride and lindane have been found to cause a double set of chromosomes in plant cells exposed to them. Additionally, benzene has been found to lodge itself in the bone marrow. The bone marrow produces the body's blood cells, which have a higher turnover rate. This means that mutations will be able to take effect much more rapidly than in other cells and are seen much more often in the blood. Finally, urethane, a widely used pesticide, is known to cause mutations in lung cells that eventually lead to lung cancer. This supports our claim because according to the mutation theory, a cell that is exposed to radiation or a chemical may develop a mutation. This mutation allows the cell to escape the controls of the body that regulate the reproduction of cells. The cells are able to multiply freely and eventually create cancer. Some also believe that chromosomal abnormalities cause cancer, as cells in cancerous tissues have been found to have an incorrect number or damaged chromosomes. Many of the man-made chemicals that we introduce into our environment, such as the chemicals listed on the last slide, have been found to cause chromosomal abnormalities or cause mutations. Thus, they mimic the mutation theory and act as carcinogens.
Arsenic has been proven to be a direct cause of malignant growths. Arsenic pollution is widespread, ranging from areas such as the soil all the way to water bodies. Those living in arsenic-contaminated environments are prone to chronic arsenicism, which causes liver, skin, nervous system, and gastrointestinal disorders. As a result, malignant tumors form as the body systems are thrown off. Other chemical carcinogens include DDT, IPC, CIPC, and aminotriazole. DDT is known to affect the liver, resulting in the formation of various liver tumors. IPC and CIPC are herbicides that belong to the carbamate group. These two chemicals initiate a mysterious type of malignant change, leaving the rest of the process to be influenced by other chemicals. Aminotriazole is a weed killer that has been known to cause thyroid cancer in test animals. This chemical is misused by cranberry producers, leading to the controversy over the dangerous effects behind it. To solve the controversy, experiments were done on rats. When the rats were fed a ratio of 1 teaspoonful of aminotriazole to 10,000 teaspoonsful of water, they developed tumors in only 68 weeks. More importantly, there is no level of aminotriazole that produced no effects on the rats. Lastly, one of the most common effects of chemicals on humans is leukemia. Leukemia is a cancer that impacts the blood and causes the bone marrow to produce abnormal white blood cells that are then called leukemia cells. The time between chemical or radiation exposure and leukemia development is relatively short. Patients have shown signs of malignant growth as early as 3 years later. Carson notes that within the period of time of the rise of modern pesticides, leukemia has become more and more common. This trend was analyzed by other scientists from the National Office of Vital Statistics, confirming the shocking rise in cases was associated with the rise in pesticide usage. When Carson shows the direct causes of using pesticides and other chemical carcinogens, she sets up a cause and effect relationship. The presence of these chemicals leads directly to the formation of malignant growth in those who take it in. Moreover, Carson highlights the serious health consequences of using these chemicals. She gives concrete examples, yet still describes the uncertain possibilities of using chemical carcinogens. There are likely to be severe health repercussions if they are used, but it is uncertain where they will impact and how long they will take to form. In addition to citing the direct causes of malignant growth, Carson cites a variety of indirect causes as well. These causes are more like a chain reaction because they take multiple steps to finally form malignant tumors. For example, the liver is vital in regulating the levels of numerous chemicals in our bodies, including hormones and vitamins. Chlorinated hydrocarbons are known to be toxic to the liver in some capacity. When they interfere with the liver's processes, they can induce indirect carcinogenesis and form malignant tumors. When hormone regulation is interrupted, hormone levels skyrocket and cause a buildup. This buildup then leads to the growth of a tumor. B vitamins are proven to defend against various kinds of cancers. When B vitamin regulation is interrupted, the body becomes more susceptible to cancer. Water pollution is another indirect cause of malignant growth because of possible mixing with radioactive material. When chemicals interact with radiation, they can spontaneously rearrange to form new molecules. Water polluted with chemicals and radiation creates a huge health issue because organisms that come into contact with it can develop cancer. Carson describes the scenario as being similar to a kaleidoscope because it is very unpredictable and flowing. Unlike the clear cause and effect relationship Carson establishes with the direct causes, Carson emphasizes the complexity of indirect carcinogens and cancer. One chemical may not lead to malignant growth by itself, but rather interfere with bodily functions and interact with other chemicals. This strengthens Carson's argument because it shows how dangerous and unpredictable using chemicals can be.
In 1959, a study by the Office of Vital Statistics found that malignant growths caused 15% of deaths in the year prior. Now, the number was only 4% in the year 1900. American Cancer Societies estimated that 45 million Americans that are currently living will develop cancer at some point in their lives, which means cancer will affect 2 out of every 3 families. Now, how this backs up our claim is that over an extended period of time, the cancer rates in Americans have gone up tremendously. The deaths as a result of this have also increased tremendously. When this was published a quarter century prior, cancer found in children was extremely rare, but today children are killed more by cancer than any other disease. Especially children ages between 1 and 14 found that 12% of deaths were caused by cancer. The first hospital solely for treating children with cancer was established in Boston, which is the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. It was discovered that growths are found in children even before they are born. Dr. W.C. Hooper of the National Cancer Institute believed that congenital cancers and cancers in infants came from the mother's exposure to these agents. These agents attack the placenta and act on the developing fetal tissue.
Safe dose concept and preventative medicine. There are many different ways that someone can come in contact with arsenic. They can be exposed through the air, water, food, medicine, cosmetics, and many other mediums. Small exposures may be considered safe. However, there is no safe dose of any pesticide because exposure to one chemical means that it is likely that you were exposed to another. These chemicals combine and can have unexpected results. Throughout the United States, fish hatcheries noticed an outbreak of liver cancer in rainbow trout. The outbreak was thought to be caused by chemical additives in the food given to the fish. In the late 1800s, humanity was faced with a large number of infectious diseases, which, at the time, seemed impossible to stop. However, by focusing on prevention, we no longer worry about them. Even though a small amount of one pesticide may do no damage, combined with other chemicals, it may take on new properties or become an entirely new substance. As we have seen in past chapters, some chemicals are harmless until another chemical destroys the enzymes that allow the liver to detoxify them. The effects that these chemical concoctions will have on our bodies is unpredictable and shows that even the smallest amount of pesticide can become deadly. The rainbow trout incident shows the emphasis that we place on treatment rather than prevention because the fish were initially being studied to determine if the water contained carcinogens. Rather than banning the use of pesticides to ensure clean drinking water, the water was being tested after the fact so that a treatment plan could be created if people were exposed. Carson says that the infectious disease outbreak of the late 1800s shows that prevention is more effective than treatment. This can be applied to cancer so that we will eventually have little to no cases and will stop the problem at its source.
In 2020, there is estimated to be 1.8 million new cancer cases and 606,520 cancer deaths in the United States. This is much higher than the cancer rates in Carson's time, and cancer in children has increased as well. The most common type of cancer is breast cancer, with 279,100 new cases. Also, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has a worldwide prevalence of 25%, and leukemia in 2020 is estimated to be around 60,530 cases. Taking these figures into account, it is evident that our continued use of chemicals is affecting the population. Against Carson's warning, not enough efforts have been put into cancer prevention, and the world is feeling the negative impacts of this. On the bright side, however, most cancers have better survival rates as treatments with radiation and chemo have gotten more effective. While this is good, the best solution for cancer is still prevention, so cancer is not caused in the first place. Overall, Carson cautions that the load of carcinogens in our environment is dangerously increased by man's use of chemicals, and as a result, more people are contracting cancer. She warns that the only way to decrease the amount of cancer for future generations is to stop using the pesticides so carelessly and work on preventing the public from coming into contact with the carcinogens.